Hi, in this video on Xmonad I'm going to be covering DWM style window tagging, which will let you tag a window across multiple workspaces and also jumping to a particular layout of a keyboard shortcut, toggling struts and putting your emacs settings in your Xresources file. So first of all, DWM style window tagging. DWM has the ability to either tag a window across multiple workspaces or across individual workspaces. So you can say, show this particular window on all workspaces or just workspaces 3, 4 and 5. Originally, in a previous video, I set this up, I set xmonad up so that I could press a keyboard shortcut and copy a window across multiple workspaces. But I couldn't get the code that would let you tag a window for a specific workspace working. And the library that you use to do this in Xmonad is the copyWindow library. And this is the sort of chunk of code it suggests using. And whenever I was using it, I just kept getting an error saying workspace X not in scope. And after several days of Googling around, I had a chat on IRC and basically I managed to get this working with some help from Fizzy and Solid, and I'll show you what this will actually allow you to do. So what I can do, normally you can move a window across to another workspace by pressing Shift Mod and then the number of the workspace. So I can move this to number 5 like so. So that's now on the 5th workspace. But what this will allow you to do is tag this window so that it appears on multiple workspaces at once. So if I press Shift Mod Control and then 3, you can now see we've got the plus sign here, and this window is now on workspace 5 and workspace 3. Now I can also remove this window from the other workspaces. So if I want to remove this window from workspace 5 and only have it show up on workspace 3, what I do is Shift Control Z, and you can now see that the window has disappeared from the 5th workspace. So I just sang a bit of tea there. So this is really useful if you want to, for instance, if you're watching a video and you want to tag it, across, a couple of workspaces, so when you're shifting, you can still see the video. Because before, just tagging it across multiple workspaces just felt a bit blunt. It was like a bit of a blunt, object. We're hitting it with. It was just a bit overkill when we only want to tag it for a specific window. So what I'm going to do now is actually go through how you set this up in your Xmonad configuration file. And as I said, what we're going to be using is the Xmonad copyWindows library. So what I'm going to do is come across to my Xmonad configuration file, and if I come down to the copyWindows, where's the copyWindows? Import Xmonad actions copyWindow. And there's a couple of things we actually need to sort of do to get this set up. I've got my layout down here and my keys, and this is the actual section. This is the EZconfig format for the block of code which Fizzy on IRC came up with, and the main thing why it wasn't working is because in the example code they give you here, it says like workspaces X, and basically what it should say is my workspaces. And my workspaces is the workspace variable that we've got defined for our workspaces. And what you need to do is actually in your main code block, if you see here, I've got workspaces equals my workspaces, and up at the top of my configuration file you'll see my workspaces. So we need to have my workspaces defined as a variable. We also need to import the copyWindow library, and the next thing we need to do, which is crucial to, you need to use my keys. So you also need to set up the EZconfig library to allow you to use that. So if I come back up, what you need to do is import the EZconfig additional keys and additional mouse bindings if you want them. And what you do in your main block down here is, after sending brace, you have this little section here, additional keys, my keys, and this is then relates to this my keys block here. Let me just have a bit of tea. So basically the next issue I came across when doing this is there's two code blocks. We've got two code blocks for defining the keys we're using. We've got the block here which we're using to copy window and enable the DWM style tagging, and then we've got this next code block here which is the additional keys we're defining with EZconfig. And first of all, what I was trying to do was, like, copy this bit into here, and it wasn't working. And basically what the solution is when you have these two blocks of code for your my keys set up, is you need to concatenate them, and that's done just simply with this ++. So what you do is you have one code block here, and you have ++ and the second code block there, and that will concatenate them and add them to the my keys variable. So those are the things you need to do to set up the DWM style window tagging, which will let you basically either tag a window across all the workspaces at once, or tag it to any number of other additional workspaces. So you can basically tag this for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or all of them, and you have keyboard shortcuts to either copy the window to all workspaces or kill copies of the window on other workspaces. So if I want to copy this to all workspaces at once, I would do I'd do Shift Control A, and if I want to kill all the other copies, so if I was on this window, if I had this window tagged across other workspaces and I wanted to kill those copies, I would run Shift Control Z, and of course you can change those key bindings. And the key bindings to tag a window across another workspace is very similar to the normal keyboard shortcut of just moving a window. When you want to move a window, you press Shift, the mod key, and the number of the workspace you want to shift it to. When you want to tag it for another workspace, you just add Control. So that would be Shift, Mod, Control, and then the number of the workspace you want to tag it to. So that's how you set up DWM style window tagging in Xmonad. And again, the block of code here was converted from the regular default key bindings to the EZconfig by Physio on IRC. So that's how you get the DWM style tagging working. The next thing I wanted to go through was actually jumping to a layout. So normally you can toggle through the various layouts you've got by pressing Mod and then space, so I can shift through these various layouts, and you can also press Shift, Mod and space to return to the first layout in your layout config. But what I wanted to be able to do was press a keyboard shortcut and jump to a specific layout. So that's what I'm going to show you now, after I add a bit more tea before it goes cold. So basically what I want to do is be able to, instead of cycling through these layouts, I want to press a keyboard shortcut and go directly to the layout. And the way we do that, if I come up here, is we need to set this up. Normally when you have the default xmonad config, it will say import xmonad. What you need to do is, first of all, you need to change that to xmonad hiding, and this syntax here, these vertical bars and whatnot. And then we're going to import xmonad layout combinations JumpToLayout. And basically what this does is this hides the vertical bars between your layout that xmonad normally uses, and then instead uses the layout combinations library for the vertical bars. So if I come down to my layout, it'll make a bit more sense. You have my layout defined, and as you can see, you have the different layouts separated by these vertical bars. So first of all, what we're doing is we're overriding xmonad's default library using the vertical bars and using the layout combinations instead. And then once we've done that, the next issue I came across after enabling these two libraries and then setting my layout was actually setting the keyboard shortcuts. If I come down here, basically this is the EZconfig syntax. And what I was thinking originally was you'd put JumpToLayout and the name of the layout that is defined here. So for instance, I've got like full tiled grid empty BSP. So what I, in my ignorance, originally thought was that you'd put those in there, but that's not the case. If you have a look up here where it says full, this is using DT's xmobar config, which shows all the workspaces and the name of the layout being used. And as I shift layouts, you will see the name of the layout changes. So full, then we have spacing resizable tall. And the reason for that is in my layout, the tiled layout with the master and stack, I'm using spacing and the resizable tool option, which allows me to adjust the height of the windows in the stack. Basically what that does is that changes the name of the layout. So the name of the layout isn't actually tiled, it's spacing resizable tool. So if I go through the next layer, you see it's spacing grid and then BSP and full. So what you actually have to do is toggle through your layouts and actually find the correct name, and then you can put that in here, which will allow you to have a keyboard shortcut to jump into that layout. So for instance, M, and that's the mod key. So basically by default it's Alt as mod 1 mask. If you change your config like you should to mod 4 mask, the mod key is going to be the super key, the Windows key, the command key on the Mac. So basically what this is saying is mod key F, JumpToLayout full, mod key T is going to be the tiled layout, G is going to be grid, and B is going to be BSP. Obviously you've got to make sure these don't conflict with any other shortcuts you've got set up or anything, or in your programs. But now basically I'm in the full mode, and if I press mod T, I go into resizable tool, mod G is grid, and B for BSP, and then I can go back to full. And this isn't a toggle, so if I'm in tiled mode and then I jump to the full screen layout here, pressing full screen the button again isn't going to toggle the layout to the previous version. It's just basically saying I want to jump to this particular layout. But I find it a bit more convenient than having to cycle through the different layouts you've got. And again, happily the keyboard's shortcuts are actually all next to each other on the keyboard. So F, T, G and B are all next to each other on the keyboard, and they don't interfere with the H, J, K, L keys that you normally use to navigate. So that's how you can set up JumpToLayout. And the thing that got me was, as I said, the name of the layout used is the name that you're going to see up in your xmobar, and it's not the name here. It's going to be composed of this. So here, as you see, we've got spacing resizable tool. So that's why down here it's spacing resizable tool, and that's capitalized, whereas the variable is lowercase. So that'd be uppercase spacing resizable tool, uppercase spacing grid, and then we've got full, and then the BSP, which isn't empty BSP, it's just BSP. So those are the layout names and how they correspond to the layout you've got defined in your config file, and how the variables will change the layout name, and you've got to take account of that, because otherwise it wouldn't work. And I had me stumped for a bit, like I was putting tiled grid. Is it uppercase grid or lowercase grid? And then finally I just tried putting in the name that was showing up, and it worked, so that was the issue. And the other thing I wanted to go through was actually ToggleStruts. So if I come to my layout, basically what you have is a bar, your xmobar, and you can set a group of windows so that they don't overlap the bar. So you can say avoid struts. So this is the strut, as it were, and you're basically saying to these windows, don't overlap that. But there are cases where you're going to want to have a window full screen and not have the little bar at the top, like when you're watching a video full screen. And originally what I had set up was outside here another 3 bars and then full, which would allow me to toggle, have some layouts that were defined as not avoiding struts, and then the one at the end would just go full screen. But that then meant I had sort of 2 full screens. I had full screen with a bar and then full screen without a bar. So there is a solution to that, which is to use ToggleStruts, and DT and DistroTube's got a good video on setting that up. And basically you do that using the manage docs, avoid struts, manage docs, ToggleStruts library. And if I come down to my keys, okay, ToggleStruts here. In DT's video, he's basically using a keyboard shortcut of mod, shift and space to toggle the struts, but that's the default key binding to return to the default layout. So you can cycle through your layouts like this using mod and space, and if you press mod, shift and space, it will return you to the default layout. So using his keyboard configuration broke that, so I changed it to mod S. So if I press mod S now, you can see the bar toggles and disappears. So that's a much better solution than having another window outside the avoid struts. It's much sort of simpler, just being able to toggle that on and off so you can go full screen with a video. The next thing I wanted to cover was using emacs. Let's come across to my emacs file. Yeah, normally in emacs what you can do is hide the toolbar and the scroll bar. So if I come across to here, you can see there's no, by default it has a big thing with like icons and stuff, and I don't like that, so I hide that. And you normally do that in Emacs by putting this in your config toolbar mode -1 and removing the scroll bar the same way. Problem is, what happens is when you're using tiling window manager like xmonad, is when you are toggling through the different layouts, you see we've got this section down here at the bottom. This is like a status bar where when you're opening files and stuff, status messages will be shown. The problem is when you've got these settings for how if Emacs should display menu bars and whatnot set in Emacs, when you're cycling through the different layouts, sometimes this bit gets chopped off and isn't visible, so you can't see the status bar when you're trying to open files and stuff. So the way around that is, instead of having these settings in your Emacs configuration file, you actually move them to your Xresources. So if I come across to my Xresources file, you'd set Emacs asterisk toolbar 0 and Emacs vertical scroll off. And once you've done that, what you'd do is you would xrdb and Xresources to pick up the changes. And then once you open Emacs and you've commented out the the settings here to hide the toolbar and the scroll bars in Emacs, and added those to your Xresources file, it behaves exactly the same way. But then when you resize the window, if I put lots of things, this always remains in place. The Emacs window doesn't go funny, it doesn't chop off the status bar, because sometimes you just get the power line down here and then you can't see the status bar, which is where you open files. So that's if I close those windows and then go back to the default, you can see it's always visible, and that's basically using those settings in your Xresources file instead of in your Emacs file. So that's a quick recap. Is the DWM style tagging. If I want to tag this to another window, I'm going to press Shift Mod Control and let's say 5. It's now number 5. If I go back to number 3, I can press Mod Control Z, and that kills the copy on the other window, basically on the other workspaces at work. So that was using the copy window. That's how we import the copy window, and we needed to import EZconfig for the keys, and also while I'm up at this section for the JumpToLayout, we had to import change the xmonad to xmonad hiding and import the layout combinations, what it is, JumpToLayout. And then what we had to do was in several places in my keys and in the main section, in the main loop, what we had to do was set workspaces equals my workspaces, and at the bottom down here, additional keys my keys, and then basically, as I said, you also need to make sure in your config up here you have my workspaces defined. And then once we've done that, we added the block of code for my keys to enable the DWM style window tagging, and also to ToggleStruts and the JumpToLayout down here, which again, these names here don't correspond to these here. The name is determined by these variables that you put in, like spacing or resizable tool or what have you, and you need to check the name corresponds to this. So if I cycle across, so that is tiled is actually spacing resizable tool, which is then defined down there. As the next one would be grid and BSP. So that's how you do jump to layout to the correct name. And the ToggleStruts, again I was changing the key to meta S to ToggleStruts, like so. And I think that was the only places you need to import stuff was that for the jump to layout, copy windows, then the of course the manage docs, ToggleStruts, and the additional keys. Once you said all that, again you come through and make sure you've got my workspaces set up, and my keys, you know, put in the where is it, my my layouts, yeah, my workspaces, additional keys. Once you've done all that, it will be set up. And the the other thing was the emacs settings, which will basically stop the status bar disappearing. So that's DWM style window tagging, jumping to a specific layout, toggling struts, and setting your emacs settings in Xresources to avoid the status bar being shut off.